Greetings. Today I'd like to chat about the importance, in fact, the critical need for the use of biotechnology in innovation and in agriculture and our ability to produce food. And I'd like to set it up by recalling Dr. Norman Borlaug, who is the godfather of the Green Revolution and is now deceased, and he was the recipient of the Nobel Prize, and for his humanitarian efforts that are, well, they're almost unparalleled, in the course of human history. Dr. Borlaug is credited with saving more than 1 billion lives through the techniques, the breeding techniques, and the breakthroughs, the technology breakthroughs in terms of plant genetics and the integration of those genetic breakthroughs, principally with wheat and rice, and then but it spilled over to all cereal crops, and it was a revolution, a green revolution, and then he was able to integrate the breeding with fertilization, and really the precursor to what we now call precision agriculture. And but Dr. Borlaug, 20 years ago, in 2002, he wrote that one of his great fears was, see, people ask them all the time, the population's growing very fast in the world. We've been adding billions of people at a rate that's, of course, never been seen before. Every 12 to 15 years, we've added another billion person in this past century. And so people would commonly ask him, do you have any fears about us being able to produce enough food, for 10 billion people, because we're predicted to have about 10 billion people in the world by 2050, so that's only 30 years away. And his reply to that was, no, I have no fear that the farmers of the world can produce the food, but what I am fearful of is, will the farmers of the world be allowed to? Yes, that was the burning question. Will they be allowed to? Because even 20 years ago, there was a movement towards anti-technology in farming. And Dr. Borlaug was deathly worried about this, because the only way we're going to feed 10 billion people, and by the year 2100, it'll be more like 11 to 11.5 billion people before global populations will flatten out and then probably start to decrease after 2100. But we have a lot of people on the way. Today we're at 7.6 billion people in the world. The year I was born, we were at 3 billion people. So we've added 4.6 billion people in my lifetime. And we have about another 3 to 3.5 billion people that are on the way. So we're going to talk about that today too. Biotechnology, technology, and innovations are the key to us not only increasing our ability to feed them better, but they're also the key to us being able to preserve nature, for us to be able to give back more land to nature and the environment and for recreation, and for us to, while we're adding billions of people, there is every reason for optimism that we can reduce our agricultural footprint. our terrestrial footprint, and we're already seeing some of this. So there's very good reasons for optimism. But the critical issue is, will we be allowed to use technology, the tools that can deliver on the promise? So let's chat about that today. So since the Green Revolution, which Dr. Borlaug and his wheat apostles are credited with creating, and we've seen remarkable progress in the world, and in some ways it's non-intuitive. There's a great book called Factfulness by Hans Rosling, and another tremendous book by Steven Pinker called Enlightenment Now, and Matt Ridley with The Rational Optimist. So there's 3 fantastic books that all in some aspect address the issue that people aren't aware of how good it is. We have a very sort of pessimistic outlook, and we have a natural tendency to think that things are going to be worse in the future, and underestimate the progress that we have made. So there's 3 great books that I recommend you read for, a really broad-ranging and enlightening sharing of knowledge about this progress. So, okay. We have higher yields, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times just since 1960s. Increased yields in corn and wheat and rice and soybeans and canola and potatoes and tubers, and so we've had incredible increases in productivity of crops. And we have less famine. The history of the world is one of famine, actually, is one of privation and starvation, and it's only recently, in our lifetime, that the world has been relieved of, let's say, endemic famines, and so we're at a period of time that's never really been seen before, where we have less famines, even though we have the most people. So again, it's sort of non-intuitive, but it's a reason for celebration. We have more calories per person, even though, as I said before, when I was born there was only 3 billion people in the world, and today there's 7.6 billion. But yet we're producing more calories per person. The FAO in 2018 estimated that we now have around 2,900 calories per person available, more than ever. Again, non-intuitive but real. And we have less poverty, and this really is a cause for great, celebration. The work is not done. There's still a long way to go, but you see, poverty is the real killer. It's not food production. We're going to talk about that. We don't have to worry about can we produce the food. We can produce it, again, if we're given the tools. But the real killer is poverty, and it's a killer because for many reasons. But you can't afford health care. You have terrible sanitation. No running water, and burning, cattle dung or burning wood, and bad lung, air quality, and so health, air quality, environment, sanitation, and nutrition, and we're going to talk more about the nutrition aspect as well. But less poverty in the world. Today, we have about 750 million people in the world living on less than $1.90 a day, which is the UN or the Yeah, it's the UN's threshold for extreme poverty. $1.90 US, adjusted for inflation. 750 million people living on less than that a day. I mean, you think about it, you can't even buy, I'm drinking a cup of coffee, but you can't even buy a cup of coffee for $1.90 anymore. I mean, and yet they have to put together their whole, everything they need to live is on this meager amount of money, their electricity, their health, their schooling, their transport, their food, their water, everything. The good news is, again, the year I was born, back in 1964, there was 65% of the world was stuck under this terrible threshold of poverty, under $1.90 a day. The year I graduated from university, from college, that had been reduced down to 50% of the world living under that poverty threshold. And in 2019, just 2 years ago, that had been reduced down to a staggering 10% of the world. So we've made tremendous progress, even though in that same period of time that I just went through, we added 4.6 billion people. So, again, non-intuitively, but the record will show the more people we've added to the planet, it's correlated with higher prosperity and with more nutrition and with more health. And the ultimate expression of health is our life expectancy, because that sums up everything. When you're dead, you're dead. And life expectancy in the last 100 years has gone, in the world, was less than 40 years of age 100 years ago. Less than 40 years, about 38 years of age was the average life expectancy for men and women in the world. And 2 years ago, in 2019, that has now reached 72 years of age. 72. And in many developed countries, it's above 80, and there's every reason to believe, with the progress we're making in terms of health and nutrition and increasing wealth of the world. Increasing wealth is critical, absolutely critical, and there's every reason to believe that our children and grandchildren, for sure, can expect to live to more than 100 years of age on average. So spectacular. Another aspect that we've seen is that we're using less land for agriculture now because of technology and because of the Green Revolution, and it had a flywheel effect. The Green Revolution spawned 1,000 other innovations around precision agriculture and breeding, targeted breeding solutions, and management of animals, cattle and pigs, chickens. In aquaculture, is very fast, non-terrestrial farming, very fast-growing sector. So we're actually using less land now, for the first time in history, to grow crops and to produce food for animals that we eat and enjoy, and to produce food that we directly eat. So Jesse Ossubel from the Rockefeller Institute, they've done some great research on this, but they call it a decoupling. For the world's history, the only way you could grow more crops was to cut down more forest, slash and burn, drain swamps and wetlands, and then put crops in there. And because as we needed to produce more food, we needed to expand our farming area, but that's not the case anymore. We have a non-intuitive, wonderful reality where we are getting more for less now. More for less. And again, talking about books, there's a tremendous book. Here, I have on my shelf this tremendous book. It's called More for Less. And this talks about this non-intuitive great reality that prosperity and innovation have brought to the world in terms of dematerializing the world. We're actually getting more goods, more services, more technology, more tools and consumer items that we need, but from less material, and that includes less land. It's remarkable. Jesse Ossubel at the Rockefeller Institute, they calculated that by the year 2060, that's 40 years away from now, we will have a situation where we could return back to nature, the land area equivalent to India. Yeah, equivalent to India. Or equivalent to 3 times the arable land of Brazil, which is a giant of food production. We could return that much to nature or to the environment if we continue on the path that agriculture is on today, and if we're allowed to use, technology and in particular biotechnology. Okay, so tremendous reason for optimism. And again, it's non-intuitive. Most people think that intensive agriculture is the enemy of the environment. It's a despoiler of nature, and it couldn't be further from the truth. The reality is, if we're going to feed a growing, expanding, hungry world, then intensive, modern, you could call it eco-modern, intensive farming, using all technologies that are safe, must be deployed. And then we can have a win-win. We can have our cake and eat it too. We're using less pesticide, less herbicide. We have less greenhouse gas emissions per food calorie. Again, we're getting more for less. We have more greening of the earth. If you're interested to visit the NASA website, you can see satellite imagery from, I think it's from 1986 to current day, and the world, on a time lapse, you can see how green the foliage of the world has become over this period. So we have a situation now where we have more green foliage on the earth than any point in recorded history, and so a big part of that is CO2. It's intensive farming, reducing our footprint, but it's also CO2. And one of the most wondrous side benefits of us using fossil fuel, because fossil fuel has liberated man. I mean, that is, there's been a few breakthroughs in the history of the world that have, catapulted us to this level of unprecedented wealth and health and well-being. Yes. And so one of them would be the breakthrough of Haber-Bosch for creating nitrogen fixation from atmospheric nitrogen. They have been credited with saving about 4 billion people's lives using synthetic nitrogen. So thank God for that technology, for that amazing chemistry breakthrough that they were able to develop. Norman Borlaug with the Green Revolution. We could also, Edward Jenner with vaccines. Gerard Darmach with the advent of medicinal chemistry, with the development of the sulfur drugs, and then Fleming with penicillin and the precursor to antibiotics. So there's been absolutely tremendous breakthroughs. And then you would have to say fossil fuel, us being able to develop the combustion engine and to propel energy, portable, dense energy from liberating carbon from fossil fuels has been, just an absolute staggering miracle for, that's the base of everything. Highly dense, effective energy that's cheap for all. And so the side effect of it, and this is sort of people don't realize, but we've been able to increase atmospheric CO2. We're over 400 parts per million now, but that has had an incredible benefit for our ability to grow crops, because CO2 is the gas of life, and plants absolutely must have it for photosynthesis. And the beauty of atmospheric CO2 is that it's free for everyone. You don't have to buy it. Every farm, every plant is benefiting from atmospheric CO2, and that's helping us not only feed the world, but it's helping our environment, like more forests, more plants. So very good. And then, and I mentioned we had more land preserved for nature. So